Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Okay, well, welcome to Meet the Author. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking to Mark Grimm of Mark Grimm Communications. Many of you might know him in this area. His book is called Everyone Can Be a Dynamic Speaker. Yes, I mean you. So welcome, Mark.
Good to see you, Joe. Great to be on the show.
Yes.
Wildly popular program.
I know we're laughing. I've known Mark since we were kids. So, but I just want to say a little bit about you before we get going.
Okay.
You were 12 years. You were a news anchor all over the country, different places. You're on the Gilderland Town Board. You have a radio show on Siena every Saturday morning, 88.3 at 10 a.m. Even if you're not a Siena alum, it's a very interesting show if you like talk radio. His company, Mark Grimm Communications, will be on the screen here. They do media relations. They do his book, what we're going to be talking about, public speaking training. If your company or you need that. They do internal communications, PR, and marketing. He does political consulting. He runs people's campaigns for them. CLE training, crisis communications, and like I say, you may have seen him on he comments on Channel 6 and some of the local channels. So, I hope that introduction was good, Mark, because one of the first things in the book you mentioned is how important the introduction is.
Yeah. Well, how often have we, it's great to be with you, Joe. How often have we been at an event where somebody said, well, here's my buddy Joe, and he's a great guy. I'm sure you're going to like him. Go ahead, Joe.
I know.
And you got to be kidding me, because the introduction is about saying, hey, your attention is valuable. It's a valuable commodity. In fact, we spend $150 billion a year trying to get people's attention. It's called advertising. So this is why you should be listening to this person. These are the credentials they bring to the table. And so often people just blow off their introduction.
I know. We have you're right. Sometimes we have a noon book review here at the library, and you try to find things to say. You don't want to just say, well, here's Joe Smith, but yeah. Well, before we talk about the book, I just wanted to mention really quickly, you were a very successful TV news anchor in sports, and you did radio. Why did you leave that world and start your own business?
Well, I moved
and plus come back home.
Yeah,
because you were.
And that's part of it. I'm from this area. I grew up in Troy and went to Siena College, of course, and went to grad school at Syracuse. And I moved 7 times in 15 years in the TV news. Either jump to a new job or get pushed. The nature of the business, and that gets old after a while. So after 7 moves in 15 years, I said that was enough. Fascinating work, but it's a really crummy profession from a professional standpoint, because you get hired and fired at a drop of a hat.
People think the news anchor is a big time glamour job.
Well, and the big networks, they make a lot of money. But you start in the smaller markets and the medium markets, and you really because so many people are willing to do it. I remember my first job in Utica. I said, I'm interested in this job. He says, Mark, would pay you $6,800. I said, I don't know if I can live on $6,800. He says, Mark, I appreciate that, but I got 200 tapes on my desk, and if you don't take the job, I'm going to go to number 2.
What year was that?
This was 1980. So today they're probably, still making probably 20 grand in the small markets.
Well, I'll just say, before we talk about the book, in your career, you did end up getting to interview President Obama and President Bush.
Bush and Clinton, yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Bush and Clinton.
I'm waiting for the Obama one. He could be on the CL Alumni Connection if he's listening.
Now, your book is to help people become a better speaker, either giving speeches or giving presentations for work, and you do public speaking training. So I guess one of the things about the book, the biggest thing you start with is why is there so much fear on public speaking?
Yeah.
For public speaking, as you know, you can tell it's the number one fear, even ahead of death.
Yeah, and then Jerry Seinfeld joked then that means if you're hearing a eulogy, people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. But if you have to confront the fears first, and so many people say, oh, I get so nervous, I get butterflies in my stomach. I said, that's okay. First of all, accept it. Nearly everyone is like that when they start out speaking. But then the question is, what is it I'm afraid of? Can I actually confront it? And I say, write it down. When you write the fears down, that's the first step in confronting them. And it said, well, I'm afraid I'm going to go blank. I said, okay, well, have an outline there with bullet points. So if you go blank, you've got protection. What if I don't know the answer to a question? I say, well, then ask the audience, does anyone else know? Or, I don't know that answer, but if you give me your email, I'll shoot it back to you. I'll find out and get back to you. So, or you don't know what the facility's going to be like. Well, visit it ahead of time or ask a lot of questions. So a lot of the nervousness can be dealt with. A lot of the fears can be dealt with if you prepare the right way, and the book talks about
you deal with that in the book. Yeah, I want to ask you, the one thing you keep coming back to in your book over and over, you just mentioned it, the audience. The audience is the key for you. Now, of course, it seems obvious, but why do you make the audience the key factor here?
Well, you say it seems obvious, Joe, but one reason I wrote my book is I couldn't find a public speaking book that I really thought hit on the point that I made in rule number 1. It's not about you, it's about them. And so much of public speaking training and books are about, oh, what should I say?
Yes.
What should I wear? How many times did I say, And I say, stop right there. The first thing you think about when you're preparing for a speech is, what does the audience want? Have you asked them? And do you know? And then are you preparing based on what the audience wants, based on what you think you should be learning? And typically, that's a bunch of information thrown into a place and then rammed at us during the presentation.
Now, you talk in your book also about doing a little research as opposed to just showing up. And how important is, not that you can always know your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, you may be talking to 20 people, you may be talking to 200. How do you research the audience?
Well, the first thing I do when I'm hired, I say, can you give me the emails of everyone I'm going to be speaking with? And I'm going to email them and say, in a nutshell, tell me what you do, in a nutshell, so I know where you're coming from, and tell me the one takeaway you want to get from this presentation.
This is when you're going to be doing a seminar on how to be, public speaking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I can. Now, a lot of times they don't have the emails. They're not sure who's coming, and they don't have the emails available. But if it's available, I email them. One, they appreciate that I'm reaching out to them. I was doing one recently in Vermont, and I said, now, I've contacted all of you. By the way, I already was halfway in the door because I've already contacted them. They said, has anyone ever done that before? And everybody laughed. I said, does that seem strange to you that here, this training is always about helping you, and no one's ever asked you what you'd like to get out of the training? That strikes me as crazy. So what I said, you told me you wanted A, B, and C. I went over what you told me. You know what? Our presentation today is about A, B, and C.
Okay, good. Because I mean, I, like many professionals out there, I've been to many different workshops and all-day things, and you're right. And no one's ever said, "What do you just show up and
And that's the foundation for Snoozeville, as I like to call it. People go to training, a lot of them say, oh, we got to go to training. Because it's what the trainers thought was important, not what they think is important.
I know, I mean,
you go to something you think is important, you're interested.
Well, that's interesting. You contact, when you're speaking, you contact, I wish.
Or I go through the person hiring me and say, you know the membership.
Yeah.
I really do press them on what they want. And that's also that's business approach too. Say, tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. And then afterwards I always ask them, did you get what you want? Feedback's another part of it.
I mean, I wish, I can think of many things I've been at. I wish people had contacted me.
Yeah, you bet. It would make it better. People don't ask for feedback. Why do people not ask for feedback, do you think, Joe?
Because maybe they figured people weren't listening, or
they're afraid of what they're going to hear.
Yeah.
And my attitude is, if I'm not doing something right, I'm dying to hear it because I want to fix it. So you give me that feedback, and if I'm doing something wrong, I want to fix it because that's going to make it better for me and everyone else.
Well, the other thing you talk about in your book, talking about feedback, this is more on the, I don't want to say it's instantaneous, but you mentioned in your book several times, one of the important things when you're speaking, whether you're a speech or a presentation, it should really be, to a degree, with some balance, it should really be interactive, not just come in and do.
Yeah.
How important is interact?
Well, it struck me. I had a group of 40 one time, and I said, these were senior people that had been around a long time. I said, oh my goodness, you're averaging about 20 years in your field. So I said, well, that's 20 years times 40. Or 40 people, think of the number of years of experience and expertise you have in that room. Let's tap into that and say, okay, you know this and you know that. Let's tap in and make the learning experience all that more powerful. Why should they just rely on my 20 years when we got everybody else there who can share their experiences and learn from each other? So if the learning experience is enhanced, they don't say, oh, that wasn't any good. I learned a lot, but I didn't get it from the instructor. Yeah. They said, no, I learned a lot, and I appreciate the Mark Grimm's show, if you will.
Now, going back to when you seeking the audience out before, I just couldn't help but asking, you're on the Gilliland Town Board, you don't you don't seek out when you're speaking at the town board meetings what people want to hear, do you?
Oh, yeah, but we do, though. I mean, that's what constituent service is all about.
Oh, okay.
I mean, in politics, I used the same model. When I ran in '07, we knocked out 2 long-term incumbents in a town that was they had the registration the other way against us. And the reason is, when I went to the door, I said, you know, I'm here to help you. You tell me what you want to do. And then I crafted my mailings based on what they cared about, which was high taxes and an unfair assessment process. So I try to keep them in mind because they're the reason I'm up there.
Okay, just the same as when you're speaking.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's delivery. In fact, politics is about delivering value to your customers. In this case, their constituents.
Okay, now, another thing you go into in your book is something you don't think about. I didn't think about it till I started doing these little TV shows and watching myself.
Before you gave a star.
I know, but what you talk about the importance of nonverbal communication and body language, and again, like the other thing, you think you would think of that, but you really don't. Talk a little bit about nonverbal communication and body language. How it's really an integral thing when you're up there.
It's the first thing people judge. And you know, when you make a first impression, that's the first thing you notice about somebody is, you know, they were engaged and excited and passionate, or they're just watching your audience. A lot of times I'll go to a presentation by somebody else, and I like to observe the audience. And I've been to presentations where the audience is like this, they're checking their iPod or something. They lost the audience. The speaker's up there, and he's clueless to the fact that he's lost the audience. And my attitude is, you better be keeping an eye on your customers, that is to say, the attendees. And if you're losing them, stop and do something else. Get them involved or something.
Okay, well, speaking of that then, another thing, now you were telling me a lot of people when they interview you for your book haven't read it, but I did read it. This term, what does the term mean, connecting with an audience? How would you define that? Because you're a professional at this.
Yep.
What is connecting with an audience?
That's a great question, Joe, and thank you for reading, because it does make for a more engaging dialogue, so I really appreciate that. How do we connect? So I say, I want to connect with the audience, and I think what it means is they get the fact that you get them. Yeah, this guy, it's not about being slick or having a $600 suit. It's about he gets me, or she gets me, and they understand that, and he wants to help me. And he's part of helping me move ahead. And once that trust is built and that connection is made, then you're clicking. Then you own the room.
And then
it's very, very exciting.
The other term you use in your book, this term, a speaker has presence. Now, how do you define, like Martin Luther King, political people have presence, but even if you're just giving a sales meeting thing, you can still have this presence.
I think it's the way you carry yourself. It's when you walk into a room, you say, well, that person's got presence. What is that? It's a confidence, but it's also an enthusiasm and it's excitement and passion. One of the most important things you can have as a speaker is passion and enthusiasm. If you're not excited, why should I be? And we've all had the speakers say, oh, this is pretty dry stuff. Well, let's try to rush through this. And I want to say, if you think it's dry, then why should I be interested in listening to it? There's no such thing as dry material. There's only dry speakers, because the imparting of knowledge is exciting if there's the value in that knowledge.
I know. I mean, I can't help but think, yesterday here in the library, we had a noon book review about a book about the Civil War, and this guy came. I really didn't know how he was. I just said, well, you want to come and do this? He said, sure. I used to be the president of this. He was one of the best speakers we ever had, and he was very passionate about. It'll be on the station when you see the book review of that. But,
great. I'll have to catch it.
Now, the other thing is, talking about connecting with the audience and presence, you talk about, and this is something you brought up about with Reagan, but obviously we all can do this if we're speaking, the importance of genuineness. How important?
Yeah, I think you have to just be yourself. And Ronald Reagan, he had his critics, this and that, but he was really, he was I thought, a very genuine communicator. He had a few big things he cared about, and he was able to communicate those things in a genuine way. And I think every one of us have to try to, instead of trying to be someone else, we just be ourselves. And the reason people aren't that anxious is because they're afraid they're going to reveal themselves and be rejected. And that's why people, and I'll give assignments to my students in class, or I'll be training folks, and they won't push it. They'll kind of they'll be guarded in what they say because they don't want to reveal themselves. And you really have to take a chance and reveal yourself. If you want people to really connect with you, got to be willing to open up too.
Well, you say in your book, if you do that, people may realize, hey, And the other you're just you're another human being, just like
Exactly.
And you even say, don't be afraid of mistakes, because what?
We all make them.
I know. People who actually have
They have empathy for it. Because
yeah.
people say, because typically people go up there and I know what their concern is, oh my God, they're going to think I'm an idiot if I fumble. And the reality is, no, they want you to do well, one, because they feel the same empathy. We know when somebody's really bombing, we feel badly.
I know, you're
because
right.
we feel for them. And also, we have a vested interest in having a good presentation because we want to get something out of the experience. So they're pulling for you. They're not there saying, as soon as Joe makes a mistake, I'm going to jump on him. That's not the reality. But that's a lot of what the fear is about. People go in with the idea they're going to think I'm an idiot if I make a mistake. That's not the reality.
Okay, and you also say public speaking, what you just mentioned, is any way you look at it, it's a way to help people.
Yeah.
No matter what it is.
Now that's why I got into this, Joe. And you asked me earlier why I left TV news, and I just realized at some point that this is a tremendous weapon and tool to be able to express yourself well. It's going to make your life better. It's going to make your personal life better, your professional life better. And I learned it. I did not start out a good speaker. So I took this path, and now I can't. People that write checks to pay me to speak, and there must be a reason for it. And I think the reason is you can help people. I wrote in my book, this is a book that can change your life. I really believe that. If you adopt the principles that I've adopted, your life can change because you can be empowered to chase any dream that you wish. But too often, if you're afraid to speak up, opportunities pass you by, and they were happening to me. They were zipping right by me until the day I said, that's enough.
Now, was this before you were TV news?
Yeah.
anchor?
I mean, even when I was a TV anchor, I was not a good public speaker, which is not uncommon. A lot of anchors get invited to these dinners and speak. They're scared to death, believe me. People just assume anchors are going to be good speakers. Talking into a glass tube like we are now and addressing an audience are two different skill sets. And many anchors don't have the second skill sets. And some of them I knew, they'll jump through hoops to avoid a public speaking appearance, and people think they're snobby. In fact, they're scared to death of getting out of
I mean, we're filming this. This is a lot easier. It's not live. There's no audio.
Yeah. Well, there's immediate feedback. You know, when people are up there, and it is very nerve-wracking to get in front of an audience if you don't do it a lot, or if you're obsessed with these fears of what can go wrong. And I say, assume things will go wrong, but emphasis the positive. When I get in front of a group, I'm not thinking what will go wrong. I'm thinking, how can I help those people? How can I change the lives of the people in that audience? I can't wait to get in front of you, because in some cases, I'm going to change their lives.
Well, you have, if you go to markgrimm.com, he's got links to a lot of his little talks and excerpts from your speech, and you are very enthusiastic.
Well, the Bill Gates quote is in there, Joe. They were interviewing Bill Gates. He said, you know software, but there's 10,000s of people that know software, but they don't have a $40 billion company.
I know.
And Bill Gates says, the thing I do best is share my enthusiasm. Bill Gates, on the secret to his $40 billion empire, he shares his enthusiasm.
He boiled all that down to that.
Yeah, I thought that was one of my favorite interviews. It was so striking that Bill Gates is about sharing enthusiasm, not about computer software.
Yeah. Now, in your book, you also say, going back to a minute ago, good public speakers are actually any organization, whatever level, from Boy Scouts to Little League to you're on the town board. Most of the people who are good speakers are sort of the leaders of all these organizations at almost every level.
Well, I find oftentimes, when they're picking a leader, it's the person that stands up and is willing to speak. And they're often not the smartest person or the most capable person. The most capable person, though, is a little shy about speaking up. And so, in many cases, the loudmouths get to be the leaders when, in fact, they're not the right fit. So if everyone was a great speaker, I think we'd have different leadership. And, by the way, we'd have different political leadership, too. Because I don't think the best and the brightest are our politicians. They're not the ones that we choose.
So there's a difference between a loudmouth and a good speaker.
That's right. Oh yeah, no. You come off like a loudmouth, you're not going to get good ratings. A good speaker, remember, is connecting with the audience, being interactive and delivering value. Where a loudmouth is talking about himself or herself, a good speaker is talking about you.
So tell us, now this is a library book. You can come and check this book out, but you can also buy it at markgrimm.com. You probably would prefer if you bought one.
Either way is great.
Tell us about who's this book for? I mean, how can this book help them? I mean, I read it. I found it. I don't do that much public speaking, but even when I'm introducing a speaker at a new book review, sometimes I get if there's 10 people there, it's not so bad. But occasionally we'll have like 40 or 50, and I'm like, sometimes you would think, and I'm only up there for 2 minutes, but it'd be really nerve-wracking. So how can this book help
anyone who gets in front of? Every time you open your mouth, you're communicating. And communication is a binary process, even if you're one-on-one. So when you're communicating, I want people to say, okay, when I'm talking to you, I want to know what you want to get out of the conversation. because in some ways it's an audience of one. So public speaking is every time you open your mouth.
Okay.
Okay, and it's also about, we communicate two ways, with our mouth and with our ears. It's about listening to what the audience wants. In the one-on-one situation, it's the other person. And we all want, I tell my journalism students, the goal here is to be good writers and speakers so you'll be more interesting people. Because every time you talk, you want to be interesting. And we all know boring people who are rarely interesting. So that book is for anyone who wants to communicate better. And if you communicate better, you will have a better life. That's what that book can deliver.
Okay. Let's see. When you do your training for this public speaking, what kind of groups do you, like if you walk into a room with 20 or 40 people, what kind of companies would hire you to train for public speaking?
Well, I do. When I want to, I'll go from a sole proprietor right up to a CEO of a major organization. I've had both of those kinds of clients. And also a group of, say, 20 or 25, maybe it's a state agency, maybe it's a corporation that wants to have their people speak better, or a bank or something like that. But if you look around, how can you be successful if you don't have some kind of spokespeople or in your organization telling your story?
Yeah.
And that's really what communication is. A speech is telling a story. It's not ramming 14 items into a speech and calling that a presentation. It's about, okay, what's my big picture? This is the big picture I want to share with you today, and my PowerPoint reinforces that. It doesn't cram a lot of text onto the PowerPoints. And I talk a lot about PowerPoint in the book because people hate PowerPoint, but the reality, it's a very useful tool if you use it properly, and it's snoozeville if you use it poorly. And I can go into a lot of detail about it.
Yeah, so you do mention PowerPoint, how a double-edged sword. The other thing that you mentioned is a double-edged sword is humor.
Yeah.
How can that be both good and, I mean,
Well, we all know. We've all been in a room when somebody comes out with a bad joke.
I know.
And I saw a very good speaker one time start off with an off-putting joke, and he lost the audience. He never got it
it
back.
was right at the very beginning.
Yeah, he came out with it. It wasn't politically correct, but it was poor taste.
Yeah.
And he lost the audience, and you're not getting it back. You're not getting it back. At the other time, you can really loosen people up, and people come to relate to you more if you use good humor. So I say use humor, but be very conscious of what you're dealing with. And you really, the only person you can make fun of these days is yourself. That is the nature of political correctness. But what I like to do, instead of having these canned jokes that people tell, get to know your audience. I try to shake hands with everybody I'm speaking with prior to it and interact a little bit. Then I'll poke a little fun at them, maybe, if it's okay with them. And sometimes I'll mention it. And I was at a dinner one time. It was a political dinner. I was working for someone who was running for office, and they introduced everybody, and there was like 4 or 5 people with the same name. They were related. And he gets up and he said, "Gee, it's great to be here at the Nash family reunion." And the whole place went crazy. But here he was, new to this place and new to this environment. But he got up there and he won him over like that because he had listened to what people were talking about.
But you don't want to be totally frivolous and not take it serious by. Well, toward the end of your book, you have some examples I thought we could talk about for good public speaking. You talk about Hillary Clinton. I mean, we're not going to talk about politics here, just as speakers.
Yeah.
You talked about how her 2 speeches in the 2004 convention and her vast improvement in 2008. In fact, you thought, and this is your business, that she sort of was better than Bill in 2008.
I thought so.
And I did notice her improvement. In fact, she made it halfway through the primaries before. I mean, that was a close race.
Yeah.
So how did she? And this is someone we can all, we've all watched her many times.
Yeah.
How do you think she improved from 2004 to 2008?
Well, she definitely grew as a speaker. She got more relaxed at it and spoke, was able to connect better, And she really, people related to her in a more powerful way. And she had an awful lot of people there. She energized. She got 18 million votes, I think.
I know.
And still wasn't elected president. But it struck me because Bill came over. I thought he kind of phoned in his speech,
On 2008.
Yeah. And I interviewed Clinton. I thought the answer he gave me were kind of automatic, sort of plastic answers.
Yeah.
And Bush 41 I interviewed, and I asked him, why should anybody vote for you? He said, read my lips, no new taxes. Why should anybody vote for you? Which is a pretty direct question, in '92. And he said, well, when you got Social Security payments you have to pay and troops around the world that need paychecks, you do things you don't like sometimes, which I thought was a much more genuine answer.
Now, you were talking about Hillary. No, I'm sorry. Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
You mentioned toward the end of your book. Why do you think? And she's a very successful speaker. I mean, forget the politics.
Well, that one speech at convention launched her career, and now she's had some missteps.
Well,
since then, but,
yeah. But I mean, not in a one. But during that campaign, the first couple of weeks,
very successful. She was, in fact, outdrawing McCain. She was overshadowing. Now, is that really, was she more successful, or was John McCain kind of more of a dud as a speaker?
Well, I think that's
mean,
part of it. I mean,
call him
she
a dud.
came across, McCain's problem was people thought he was too old. Let's face it. They thought tired. I mean, not necessarily age, but rather, we want something new. And Palin, here she comes onto the scene, the soccer, or not, the hockey mom from Alaska, attractive and energetic and passionate. And she hit just the right note right at the right time there. And she did energize, which is what McCain was going for, to energize, the base with Palin. And at that speech, he gave a very energizing speech, a very passionate speech, and she had the right look, and it all fell into place. And she really launched her career from that speech.
Yeah, and
as did Cuomo, and as did Obama at the convention. Obama launched his real national political career at the Democratic convention.
well, I think one of Cuomo's speech I recently read, his speech at the '84 convention.
I think it was, yeah.
Was named in they gave like the top 100 speeches or something of the last century, and his was like 11th, which is I wouldn't have. I mean, I remember
No,
it
he
was
was a great
speech.
speaker, and my mother actually typed that speech.
Oh, okay. That's why she used to work
Yeah.
at the.
Yeah, it was, and she had actually the written notes from that at some point. I don't know if she still has them, but he was very passionate, engaging. You notice the passion, enthusiasm is a consistency here.
Yeah.
Finding that you have to engage people, you have to really convince them that you believe it.
And you don't have to be
in plain language. I don't like big words. Cut them out. Speak in plain language and speak in phrases rather than sentences. One of the biggest mistakes people make as speakers is they read in the reading sentences. Nobody talks in full sentences. We don't talk that way. We talk in phrases. So a speech should be a conversation on paper.
And then you mentioned in the book, I didn't know this because I've seen the clip millions of times, the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech was only 16 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, we see the same excerpts, but I guess I would have thought, well, he probably spoke for not.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I made my point was, and that's great, Joe. I made my point that you don't have to length is not quality.
Yeah.
But we're taught that way. Because if you do a 15-page term paper, that's a bigger deal than a 10-page term paper. And I say, no, it isn't. What if it's 15? And we all tried to fill in and stretch out our writing and put all this junk in there because we had to do 15 pages. And it's the wrong way to train somebody. You need to deliver value. And if you do it in 8 pages instead of 15, then the 8 is better.
no, you teach in college. Are kids still doing that?
Well, you know what? I don't give term papers and tell you why. There's so much plagiarism on the internet.
Oh, I
You
know.
can't police it. You really can't police and really decide whether it's somebody's work or not.
All right, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's
a whole nother issue.
That's another
though.
show, which I could
I
get back to
know.
that too.
Well, your book, Everyone Can Be a Dynamic Speaker, Yes, I Mean You, by Mark Grimm. And then right below it, it says, read this book that could change your life. And you've shown passion and enthusiasm here just talking to you for half an hour. And I guess if anyone's watching, anyone can hire you for public speaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
If anyone's running for office, he does do political consulting. He's run many campaigns. So thank you so much for being here, Mark. And we will see you next time on Meet the Author.